Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is your host Ben on the Lover of Tech channel, and what I have here is an in-house camera comparison, this time between the Galaxy Note 9 and the Galaxy S9 Plus. Both these cameras have pretty much identical hardware, so we are going to test to see what are the differences between the two. First, I'm starting with the front-facing camera specifications, and both these cameras have the same identical hardware with an 8 megapixel camera with an f1.7 aperture, 1.22 micron pixel size, with autofocus, and also video that shoots up to 1440p 30 frames a second and 1080p 30 frames a second with and without stabilization. So what we're going to do is start with a walk, see how the dynamic range, the quality, the stabilization is at 1080p 30 frames a second on the selfie video. Turn around and then do a run. Now we'll switch over to 1440p QHD 30 frames a second, where you do get a wider field of view and there's no stabilization between both these cameras. And we're seeing how the image quality, the stabilization looks like. Now turn and take a run. Welcome back to another camera comparison, and this time it's an in-house battle between the Galaxy Note 9 versus the S9 Plus. We're going to be testing out the video shooting capabilities of both these smartphones, and I'm going to run you through the main camera specifications, which are very similar in terms of hardware. Now, both these cameras are sporting dual 12 megapixel camera sensors, with the main one having an f1.5 aperture with the dual aperture mechanical change, where it does change from f1.5 to f2.4, 1.4 micron pixel size, optical image stabilization, and a secondary telephoto zoom lens that ×2 zooms, and is 12 megapixels with an f2.4 aperture, 1.0 micron pixel size with optical image stabilization. Both these in terms of video are able to record up to 4K 60 frames a second, 4K 30 frames a second, and also 720p at 960 frames a second super slow motion mode, and also 720p at super slow motion mode at 480 frames a second. So the S9 Plus did receive the software update to be able to do the new 480 frames a second, and also stated before, the 480 frames a second does only work in single take mode. Everything has been set into automatic mode unless stated otherwise, so let's start with the daylight video test. So this is the 4K 30 frames a second video recording mode between the Galaxy Note 9 and the S9 Plus, testing out the image quality, the stabilization in daylight. And still in the 4K 30 frames a second video recording mode, both these cameras do have a ×2 telephoto zoom lens. And what we're going to do is test it, ×2 zoom, and take a walk to see how the stabilization changes. And still in the 4K 30 frames a second video recording mode, what we're going to do is run and see how the stabilization is on both these cameras. And again, still in the 4K 30 frames a second video recording mode, what we're going to do is switch to the ×2 telephoto zoom mode on both these cameras, ×2 zoom, run and see how the stabilization is in video. Now we'll switch to the 4K 60 frames a second video recorder mode on both the Galaxy Note 9 and the S9 Plus. Both these phones with their newer generation chips that are able to record 4K at 60 frames a second higher frame rate. Might not translate to the final video, but it's a great option to have for smooth 4K footage, as well as being able to slow it down in post yourself. See how the stabilization and the image quality looks like. Now switching over to the 1080p 30 frames a second video recording mode, this on the Galaxy Note 9 versus the Galaxy S9 Plus. And we're just seeing again how the stabilization, the image quality looks like in daylight. Start with a small walk. And I'll turn it into a run. and stop. Now we'll turn. And what we're going to do is introduce the ×2 telephoto zoom on both these cameras. Then take a walk. And then turn it into a run. Now we're testing out the focusing speed on the Galaxy Note 9 in 1080p 30 frames a second using the iPhone X as a subject using the new super speed dual pixel autofocus, and we're just going to see how fast it is to focus and track. Super speed dual pixel autofocus working as fast as ever. Now switching over to the Galaxy S9 Plus using the same super speed dual pixel autofocusing system in 1080p 30 frames a second using the iPhone X as a subject. Let's just see how fast it tracks in focus and video mode. Tracking really fast and really well. See if there's any difference between the two, but they're looking pretty similar and the same to me. Now we're in the 4K 30 frames a second video recording mode on the Galaxy Note 9 versus the Galaxy S9 Plus. And we're just testing out the low light performance, the image quality and the stabilization in low light. And again, both these cameras do have the exact same hardware in terms of a 12 megapixel telephoto ×2 zoom lens with optical image stabilization. And now we're going to stop. We are going to ×2 zoom, and see how the image quality and the stabilization changes when zoomed in. Now switching over to the 4K 60 frames a second. Again, this is just seeing how the low light performance changes the image quality and the stabilization. Both these with their newer 10nm Generation 2 chipset, either the Snapdragon 845 or the Exynos 9810, can record at a high frame rate in 4K. See how that looks like in low light. This is now the 1080p 30 frames a second video recording mode between the Galaxy Note 9 versus the S9 Plus. And again, we're just seeing how the image quality changes, the stabilization in low light. What we're going to do now is just stop, ×2 zoom, and now see how the image quality and the stabilization looks like when zoomed in. So this is now the 30 frames a second 1080p video recording mode for the selfie video in low light. And this is on the Galaxy Note 9 versus the S9 Plus. And again, we're just seeing how the image quality, the stabilization looks like in low light. Now this is the 1440p QHD 30 frames a second video recording mode between the Galaxy Note 9 and the S9 Plus for the selfie camera. And again, just seeing how the image quality, the stabilization is like in low light. Both are looking good. We really just have to see if there's any difference between the two. that about wraps up the video comparison test between the Galaxy Note 9 versus the S9 Plus. But what I wanted to do was give you my conclusion and my 2 cents on what I thought when testing both of them side by side. Now, both the Galaxy S9 Plus and the Galaxy Note 9 have one of the most extensive video shooting modes on any smartphone to date, but there are slight differences between them that I noticed when using them. First, in regards to the low light performance, the S9 Plus has colors that lean more to the greenish side, whereas the Note 9 has more warm color tones that lean more to the red side. In terms of performance, in terms of details and sharpness, very similar in low light, but the color temperature differences do slightly differ in that way. And now, as stated, the S9 Plus did receive the latest software update to be able to record the 480 frames a second on the S9 Plus, but the 4K frame rate when recording in daylight and in low light doesn't seem to be steady at 30 frames a second. It seems to be having a lot of skipped and drop frames, and it makes the stabilization with EIS look very jittery. The only thing I can put this down to is there is some communication issue between electronic image stabilization on the 4K video recording to the frame rate. So that's something I noticed, but I had no issue with that on the Galaxy Note 9. So I know this is something that is a bit inconsistent. Some don't have this problem, but I had this problem on my S9 Plus, but I didn't on the Note 9, and that's something I noticed when I was watching it on the video side by side. As stated before, it is great to see that the 480 frames a second at 720p super slow motion that gives you 12 seconds of super slow motion recording is now available on the S9 Plus. But one thing I did notice is that it only does work in single take mode just like the Galaxy Note 9, but there is a slight enough shutter delay where it does make it harder to get the shot compared to the Galaxy Note 9, whereas I had no issue with the Galaxy Note 9 with that shutter lag, which made it a lot easier to get the super slow motion shot in single take mode in 480 frames a second. So that's something to bear in mind that I noticed myself when I was using it. And last but not least is the selfie video performance. In terms of stability in both the 1440p and the 1080p video recording mode, and also the sharpness and detail, very much the same and on par, but the colors to the skin tone I do slightly prefer on the Galaxy S9 Plus, but that's more of a preference. That's not necessarily because there's anything that's going wrong with the Note 9, but that's just me and that's something I noticed. Overall, both these smartphones are great for video, but I would say that the Galaxy Note 9 slightly edges ahead because it's more consistent, especially when it comes to the stabilization, the frame rate in 4K, and also the lack of a shutter delay when recording single take in 480 frames a second. Let me know what you think of this video camera comparison between the S9 Plus and the Note 9 in the comment section below. Let me know which one is your favorite out of the two, and also follow me on social media, and also hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you do not miss any content that is posted on the Lover of Tech channel. There's more content from the Note 9 to be coming. And again, I'm your host Ben, signing out, and you will see me next time.